Hi, I'm Carol King, and I am a devotee of ferns. I, I started planting ferns after I put in the trees that I'm standing under. They're sycamores, and I planted them in order to have some shade in the front of the house and to block some of the street lights from my bedroom window. And then once I had this shade going, I had, what do I plant under it, because the tree roots are in the way, and so you need something that doesn't need a big hole. And so and it turns out that there's an awful lot of ferns that don't need swampy conditions, deep, misty. They will stand just fine in ordinary humidity that we have around here, and a reasonable level of shade and somewhat regular moisture, but honestly not that much. It's really surprising how hardy they are. You see the falling leaves on it, but this is known as a tassel fern. If you see, there's a new frond coming up, and it looks like a tassel. And this one is kind of cool because it's evergreen, it's sturdy. They can be a lot smaller. You can see I've lined the path over here with little ones, and they get a fair amount of sun in the late morning most of the summer. And then this one, it'll get a little brownish, but still up. And then in the spring, it has these wonderful little fiddleheads that come up and renew the foliage. But it's basically, it doesn't spread. You know, new ones pop up from the spores that as they go through their process. New little ones will pop up here and there, but not rapidly, not like weeds. And otherwise it doesn't spread. It stays in this nice circle, and it's a wonderful specimen plant, really hardy. So it kind of different from your notion of soft and frothy ferns. This is a lady fern. This one has a red stem. They don't all. But this lady fern, you see how kind of feathery it looks? This is what people think of really as ferns. And the lady fern is a native, and it's not evergreen. It dies back at the end of the year. But it is, if you will, your starter fern for a garden that, you know, that's just an ordinary garden around here. They spread somewhat, not too awful, because this one you can see has been in the ground a little while, been in 2 years or more, and hasn't really spread. I have some more that are in maybe a better soil condition, so they've spread some more. But that is a good example of if you just start with one. Your lady fern's easy to find, and it's easy to grow. If you get an extended drought, you might water it a little bit, but you don't have to. And then if we're talking about, we're going to talk about this one right here, the corner here. You see this one, it looks kind of, I think of it as my structural one. This is an autumn fern. It is evergreen. It stays up. And if you look right over here, that's a new frond, even though it's the color of autumn leaves. And that is why it's called an autumn fern. Like I said, not native, but it's really well adapted. They will spread somewhat. This one has gotten a little bigger, and if I could probably divide this one if I wanted to get some more. They have presence, they have height. They don't get a whole lot taller than this, maybe another foot, but they're an underpinning, a structural element of the garden. This one right here, these are Christmas ferns. They are native and they're evergreen. They stay up all year. And I think of them as kind of soldiers. They're up in a line. And they're basically, they're kind of a fishbone appearance if you look at each individual one. But anyway, that's, there's the Christmas ferns will spread a little bit, not terribly awful as far as taking over the world, but they make this kind of upward punch if you will, in the garden, in the mass of all the plants. Once you get into ferns, then you get specialty things that you find. This one, I found this. It's called an upside down fern because that's the top, but it looks like the bottom, other than the fact that the spores are on the bottom. This raised bed right here was, it was put in, there's a path on the other side of it, and I tried something else in it, and it's kind of iffy because it gets some sun, particularly in the summer, in the middle of the day, but otherwise it's in shade, so it's not, you can't really plant anything but a sturdy shade plant that will take some sun. Anyway, so what I hit upon is the ostrich fern, and want to stress, ostrich fern is one that you can find, plant with great caution where you put it. But in the right spot, it's wonderful. The ostrich fern is enthusiastic. All you need is one, although I have two here. That's this and this. And I put them in this raised bed where hopefully they're not going to go anywhere, but in a year or two, this bed will be mostly full of ostrich ferns. What you're looking at right in the middle of this is an example of a fern which does not have the spores on the backside. It puts up fertile fronds. All the spores are in here. So that's what you're looking at, is the fertile fronds. And when I say spread, I planted these in here last March. They were root sections from an existing plant. That was March. 1, 2, somebody's eating it, I don't know what. But 3, 4, it has put out 4 little babies, rootlings, just in that time. They are native, and they are the ones that, if you've ever heard of eating fiddleheads in Maine in the spring, they go out and cut the fronds, the opening ferns up, which look like a fiddlehead. And then cut them up and then saute them in butter and eat them. And that is the ostrich fern that they're eating. Not all ferns are edible. Ostrich ferns are. Now, what I planted in the middle, we're going to look at this elsewhere, but this is a wood fern. There's a bunch of different wood ferns. You can see they have this kind of lovely, chunky, sort of comfortable meat and potatoes look. You know, they're not wispy. They're not structural necessarily. They're just sturdy. And they can get very good size, and there's a bunch of different ones. We'll see a few more in a minute. But they are also, they will hold their own. So the ostrich ferns should spread, but this should survive just fine as its own island in the middle. The sensitive ferns, I've just started one here. These will spread kind of, they want a little more moisture than a lot of the other ones I'm looking at. So in a real dry spell, I'll come out and water this. And this area right in here is full shade, so it doesn't have to contend with the sun. But it's that lovely, bright, cheerful, sunny color, and then that big, almost cartoon-like leaf or frond, sorry, that just looks different than all the others. And then the other thing about them is it's another one of those with a fertile frond. So that this is a fertile frond. So they are fairly strong-minded as far as spreading. I anticipate when we get done that this will all be, most of this out to about here is going to be a ground cover of that fern. Under here we have a couple different, this is a shaggy shield. It is a Dryopteris, one of the wood ferns, but a shaggy shield. See how it's kind of shaggy on the edges? See? So it dies back in the winter, as does this one, which is another wood fern. It's a remote wood fern. I just happened to, what distinguishes it, I don't know, but it's a nice size. You know, you find these little ones. This is a deer fern I just got this last year, so I'm going to learn about it, but I think it's a little tiny tuck in the corner one, which is a lovely thing. We're going to introduce here back in the back there, that is a cinnamon fern, native, and I think of it as the fireworks, because they burst from the center with this bright green. They will spread somewhat, and you can see when you get a whole bunch of them, it's like a dinosaur park, you know, with big, before there were trees, there were tree ferns. The things that look like trees in the dinosaur pictures are actually giant ferns. And these kind of give you that same sense of giant creatures, plant creatures. So anyway, their new foliage comes up cinnamon color. And then I don't know, but I've not seen any other ferns with these as they're turning for the year, as they're getting ready to go back into the ground. You see these, what can I call it, cinnamon colored spots on the leaves. And the cinnamon, I have another one, and it's doing the same thing. So this is a grand lady, grand old man, whatever, of the garden. When you put them in the back of the bed because you want to give them room, and they're just gorgeous. And this one is called a beech fern. This is a broad beech fern, and it's a frothy thing, but it's this is getting a little frothier as it is coming, but it spreads in clumps. I planted one about 2 years ago right there, and that's what I have, and it likes to fill in space. Got a couple lady ferns right there. You might recognize them, but it's a little different if you look at this beech fern. I think of it as a zzz. If you look, it looks like flashes of electricity. Zzz. I don't know if you can see it, but I see it, and it has this energy to look at it. It's a nice one. It doesn't take a whole. It's a lot more hardy than you might think. To look at how delicate it seems, and that's probably the word on a lot of these ferns. They may look delicate, but they're really very hardy, and you can do a lot with them. Why would you not plant a fern? As long as you have an ounce of shade, you can find a fern that will go there. And you don't have to do much to them. You just plant them in there. Mind the worst of the season. Don't put them in too much sun, but give it a try.